You'd need a water diviner to arrive at the exact Labour Party position on Brexit today. In the wake of their conference in Liverpool, about which they all seem tremendously pleased, we have a Labour frontbench with three drastically different positions on Brexit. We have the two most important, one assumes, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, saying they don't rule out the so-called people's vote, but they rule out it being able to decide to cancel Brexit and remain in the EU. On the other hand, we have Keir Starmer, or Sir Keir, to give him his Sunday name, the name he inexplicably doesn't like to be called. He, in an unscripted departure from his agreed speech in Liverpool, pointedly put back on the table a referendum, again, which could decide to cancel Brexit altogether. The shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry, had yet again a different position. She said we should go for the EEA option, which is effectively the Norway option. Now, apart from the practical, that such a multi-option referendum would require appendices and encyclopedia with the ballot paper for people to consult before they put their X on a ballot paper. Quite apart from that, the decision, which is implicit in all of these positions, is that the decision made by 17.4 million people just 2 years ago may be somehow overridden. That the binding referendum, which the Prime Minister, David Cameron, remember him, told us at the ballot box, would bind the government's hands. They made it clear it was a one-off. It was a once-in-a-lifetime. They even spent £9 million of your money circulating everyone in the country, every household, telling you in that pamphlet that your decision would be final. Well, just 2 years on, the Labour Party no longer regards it as final. I happen to believe that Corbyn and McDonnell are right in that any referendum which reopened the substantive issue of whether Britain stays or goes from the EU would be a betrayal, not just of the 17.4 million, not just of the Labour Party manifesto on which they were elected in significantly increased numbers only a year ago, dear listener, but it would be a betrayal of democracy itself. The idea that we can vote in 2016 to leave the European Union and vote again in 2019 actually to be like Norway is fanciful in the extreme. It would have grave consequences for the credibility, the integrity of Britain's democratic system. And frankly, after the Iraq War, there's not many more blows that the integrity and credibility of our political system can take. It would be a dramatic fillip boost to the far right in British politics, to the street, brown-shirted right, and to the besuited white-collar variants of the British right. It would lend itself to a national narrative that Britain had been stabbed in the back, and moreover, stabbed in the back by Labour. 65% of all Labour-held parliamentary constituencies in the parliament we have today voted for Brexit. 5 million Labour voters voted for Brexit in a khaki election, dear listeners, one in which Theresa May wrapped herself in the Union flag and said this election is about Britain versus the EU, and its fifth column in the British Labour Party would be electorally catastrophic for a generation or perhaps forever for Labour. But the same water diviner would be required to point to the position of the ruling Conservative Party today as they go into their conference in Birmingham on Sunday. Where do they stand? And you'd need Mystic Meg to tell us where Britain stands. We're less than 6 months away from the most important political turn that Britain has taken since the Second World War. More important even than joining the common market in 1973. This will change the lives of everyone on this island, either for the better, as I believe, or for the worse, as many of you believe. But either way, it is a gigantic turning point, and less than 6 months to go, nobody at all, least of all, I believe, the Prime Minister, knows how it's going to work out. But hold on, who's that tilting at windmills on his donkey, Don Quixote? No, it's Boris Johnson. Thanks to his highly remunerative column in the Daily Telegraph, they gave over most of the newspaper to the Scribblings. £266,000 a year is the highest paid newspaper columnist in newspaper history. He has come to the rescue. Or has he? His plan is that Britain should be not just Canada, but Super Canada. Hyphenated Super Canada. If that was such a good idea, how come we're only finding out about it now? And what does it mean in any case? Well, according to Boris, it gives us tariff-free, barrier-free access to the European Union, but the super bit means removing the so-called backstop which is thought necessary to maintain partition between the 6 counties of the northeast of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which will remain in the European Union. There are many problems with Boris's plan, not the least of which is that the Ulster Unionists don't agree with it. And without the Democratic Unionist Party's 10 votes in Parliament, Theresa May no longer has a majority for anything at all, never mind Brexit. But we'll be exploring with considerable experts just what this Super Canada proposal actually means. The opinion polls don't look good for Labour. Most parties get a bounce out of their opinion poll rating after their conference. Labour has just dropped by 4 points, or 5, depending on which opinion poll you believe. Labour is now down to 36% in both of today's polls. I believe that's because, at the very least, they came out of their joyous, exultant epiphany at Liverpool with nobody quite knowing where they stand on the biggest issue in British politics. And what's going to happen in Birmingham? Last year, it was a disaster for Theresa May. She was struck down, much as I am this evening, with a cough and a cold and unable to actually be heard as she gave her leader's address. And such was the security in the conference that a prankster was able to come forward and literally hand her her P45. Will, at the Conservative conference this week, coming, a real P45 be in the post? Because make no mistake about it, Boris Johnson's démarche in the Telegraph today was not just to fill 4,000 words of the Daily Telegraph. It was a job application. It was a leadership bid in the offing. Now, the presumption of innocence is a very precious and important thing. It's quite often abandoned these days. In Britain, we have protections against the reckless flow of speculative information, which may not in the end be information. once people have been charged with criminal offences. On another night, I'll return to that point in another case. But in the United States, it's a full-blown three-ring circus over who should be appointed to the US Supreme Court. Now, it's come to something when British newspapers, including The Guardian, are not just leading with the story of Brett Kavanagh, the nominee of Donald Trump for the Supreme Court vacancy in the United States, but the first three stories on the front page of The Guardian this evening are all on that subject. Anyone who heard the distraught, tortured, bereft, desolate evidence of the alleged victim of sexual assault by Brett Kavanagh could not fail to have been moved. Well, unless you were a Republican senator, some of them did not seem to be moved. On the other hand, the testimony of Kavanagh was also itself quite powerful. One of these two people is mistaken, to say the least. Which one it is riveting the United States and appears to be riveting our country too. I'm looking at 3 television screens and it's on all of them, all 3 of them. Is this another sign of how Americanized our lives have become? Or is it, as Dan Wooten pointed out earlier, because of the cross-oceanic cultural importance of the Me Too movement, where men who have for centuries, millennia, abused their positions of strength, to force themselves upon women? We'll be discussing that with some high-powered American guests too. We'll also be looking at Pret-a-Manger and the disastrous story of the baguette which killed a young girl on an aeroplane.